Xponential is still live, and here we are at Zeocast again with an incredible guest. I've been wanting to talk to this man for so long. So good to have you with us, Daniel Plaisance.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk about some of what we're working on, and appreciate the opportunity here at Xponential. It's been a really exciting week, and all pointing us in the direction, I think, of kind of expanding and growing and galvanizing this industry, which is extremely exciting.
Absolutely. Well, you all have been a hidden gem for a long time. You no longer are. Tell us about your role and what's happening at Tulsa Innovation Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with an organization, as you mentioned, called Tulsa Innovation Labs. Our mission really is to catalyze the growth of an inclusive and dynamic innovation economy in Tulsa. And we do that by making programmatic investments in 4 industries that we really think are poised to grow, and specifically poised for Tulsa really to lead the way in. So we UAS and AAM is the portfolio I lead. We also have a cyber practice, an energy practice, and a virtual health practice. But essentially what we do is we look at the unique strengths that Tulsa can bring and really the competitive advantage or unfair advantage in the industry, and we try and galvanize a lot of that growth and that collaboration through investments in programs. So we don't invest in companies directly per se, but we'll invest in things like entrepreneurial support programs, like research and development centers, like testing and development infrastructure, office and co-working space, just the things necessary really to launch and grow a more dynamic and really world-class innovation ecosystem in Tulsa. And we think that specifically in UAS and AAM, we have a really important story to tell and a really important role to play as this industry continues to grow.
Wow. Well, now, you talked about kind of exploiting all the really great things about this region and this inclusive ecosystem. Why Tulsa? Tell us about Tulsa, especially with this space with UAS and UAM and AAM. Why? Is there space there? How'd this come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, backing up a few years, and Tulsa Innovation Labs is about 3.5 years old now. And really when we got started, we wanted to be very strategic and really follow the data in terms of where we were putting our efforts. So we validated and looked through about 180 or 185 tech sectors, growing tech niches, to narrow down to the 4 that I mentioned earlier. Really, what are the organizations and the industries that are really primed to grow specifically for this region? And some of the criteria for that were things like the incumbent industry base and incumbent workforce. So aerospace is the 2nd largest industry in Oklahoma. There are major sort of corporate assets on the manufacturing side, on the MRO side, and then the testing and development side as well. It's contestable. It's a contestable industry. I think as of when the study was done, 65% of aerospace and aviation companies are headquartered outside tech hubs. So that's really a pool that Tulsa and cities like us can play in. We're not going head-to-head in oil and gas with Houston or in financial technology with New York, right? In which case a city of our size is really going to get scraps. We think that this is at the right point on the growth curve for the industry, and also has the specific assets in Tulsa that really are going to enable us to take a leadership role. To toss out a few more that we really work closely with some top level experts, especially at Oklahoma State University and the Unmanned Systems Research Institute there, who's done a ton of really cutting edge work for federal clients, for DoD and FAA and NASA and NSF, as well as industry clients. University of Tulsa has a really spectacular cybersecurity program, right? So some of that enabling technology that's going to enable this industry to really thrive, and I think is sometimes has not quite been solved and tackled yet. And then we also think that our kind of customer base, right, our existing corporates are really well positioned to be adopters of this technology. So from an economic development standpoint, we say, well, look, growing a UAS cluster here, I think we have the right assets to be a leading UAS cluster in the country. But it's also going to help support the ongoing competitiveness of our local industries and institutions now. If you know much about Oklahoma, it's an energy and traditionally oil and gas, but increasingly renewables presence. big logistics presence located in the center of the country and a lot of intermodal logistics assets. And then it's an urban hub in an extremely rural area, right? So it's a 1 million person metro area, but becomes extremely rural quite quickly. So we really think that those are a lot of the kind of environments in which this technology stands to be adopted early.
Well, now tell me, who is currently in TIL now? Like, what kind of companies are already there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I mentioned, some of the adjacent corporates, the oil and gas, the logistics, those sorts of things. On the aerospace side too, you have everyone from the large established corporates. So just to name a few, American Airlines, their largest maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility in the world, actually the largest commercial MRO facility in the world, is located at Tulsa International Airport.
Study on that.
Yeah, no, it's a really fascinating and kind of unknown asset. Although if you're in the MRO world or if you're in American Airlines, they think of Tulsa as a sort of, it's proximate to Dallas, which is one of their big hubs, and Atlanta and all of that. So that's an asset around which to build. You have the manufacturers Lufthansa Technik, you have BizJet, you have tons and tons and tons of component suppliers to support all of that industry. And when we're thinking really about our right to win in the innovation sector, I think what we look to there is both, yes, the customers, but also the know-how, right? The workforce, the expertise, the engineering talent that this industry is going to need to go from the prototype phase that we're in now, right? And we're walking around and seeing really spectacular futuristic technologies. But in order to get those into large-scale production out in the world and solve some of the problems to integrate them really into the airspace, you're going to need some institutional knowledge. And I think we have a lot of that as well. On the startup side too, and a lot of this driven by the spectacular work at our universities and local talent there, we have everything from, just to name a few, Airwise Solutions, which is does a lot of right-of-way work, does a lot of inspection work. They have a software platform and a very interesting, very impressive developments there. There's Vigilant Aerospace Systems out of Oklahoma City, which is doing a lot of the UTM work and the detect and avoid work for some of the kind of preeminent testing ranges around the country. WindShape is a recent transplant to Tulsa. They are a Swiss company that's doing weather simulation and weather testing for small UAS. So we have, I think, kind of covered the waterfront from the large corporates and the established corporates down really to the kind of early stage and growth stage startups, which is, it's an extremely exciting group around which we can build.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very amazing. And over the next 5 years, what do you think the Tulsa Innovation Labs and the ecosystem will look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I buried the lead maybe a little bit here.
Yeah.
Our really main kind of propelling force recently has been the awardal of the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Grant. So this was a Department of Commerce grant, Economic Development Administration grant, that essentially asked regions to define what is your growth industry, what's going to be the future of your economy, and how can you make investments to make that happen. So that's extremely aligned with our mission at TIL. There were 529 regions that applied from across the country. There were only 21 winners, and there are only 2 that are really focused on this kind of future mobility work, and it's Tulsa and Detroit. So we have from that the opportunity to we have funding now to set up a really innovative applied R&D center with Oklahoma State University with support from the University of Tulsa. That's basically serving as a front door for industry to come access some of the expertise in academia, and we're setting up favorable IP terms. We're really giving kind of the mandate for this new center to be outward facing and solving industry problems, right, as opposed to doing sort of early stage fundamental research, which of course is important. But I think with this industry, we're really at a stage now, and there's a gap in terms of what is the hub going to be for that kind of translation? Right. What's the Atlanta to biotech, the Pittsburgh to robotics, right? What is that for UAS? And we really think that with this investment, there's a strong case for it being Tulsa. We also are setting up a testing infrastructure. About 114 nautical miles is our forecast when all said and done, called the Skyway Range, that will allow for testing in a wide variety of locations. It's extremely unique. It's a collaboration again with Oklahoma State and with the Osage Nation, which borders Tulsa to the north. And what we really think is interesting about this is based on land owned by the Osage Nation and a facility that they own. We'll be able to do some of this testing in extremely close proximity to the city. So this asset is located 6 or 7 minutes from downtown Tulsa, about 6 miles from Tulsa International Airport. So really, as you look towards the future development of this industry, going from your kind of remote agriculture and oil and gas pipeline inspections into the more urban operations and integrated operations in more complex and populated areas, we think that we are very well positioned to really be the go-to site for testing a lot of those technologies.
114 nautical miles. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's a current presence already of a test field and range, but it sounds like this is being expanded greatly.
Yeah, that's right. And really, again, you know, our focus as an economic development organization is we want this to be open. We want this to be accessible. We want this to be a place where the industry can come and, iterate and solve their problems and develop new technologies and test those technologies, prove the safety case to the FAA, of course. And I think that it's a really, it's a fascinating time for this industry. I will say as well, to your question about the next 5 years, we are at the point now where we have these entities stood up, and now the doors are being flung open for industry collaboration. We've been designing this sort of with advice from our advisory councils, from our industry collaborators, but really want to make sure that we're working alongside and hand in hand with some of the more innovative companies, and that's really what we're doing here. I'd say finally that there's a real focus over the next 5 years that we're seeing on shifting the geography of innovation. I think
What does that mean?
Well, so I think that for a long time, federal research investments, venture capital, talent, and corporate presence in the innovation sector has been concentrated in a few areas, right? So you have Northeast, you have New York, Washington, D.C., and the sort of DMV area, you have Silicon Valley. And I think that recently, based on everything from the pandemic to the kind of macroeconomic forces that are incentivizing remote work, incentivizing the sort of geopolitical reshoring of a lot of manufacturing and technology, and then the shift as well to really a focus on kind of hard tech and hardware and cyber physical systems that are tackling big problems. I think that you're finding a lot of companies, and we're seeing this locally, really reconsidering what does a presence look like in the heartland, in a state where there hasn't been that. And what's really fascinating and evidenced by some of the Build Back Better work that we've been able to do is that the federal government feels the same way. So for the first time in 35 years or so, the National Science Foundation last year stood up the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, which had the explicit mandate of essentially widening the pipeline for science and technology, right? So instead of saying, purely we're sending money to the same handful of places, there's now an explicit mandate from the National Science Foundation, from the Department of Commerce, from the Department of Energy, from a lot of this major spending that is really going to be spread out, I think, more evenly across the country. And I think it really behooves companies to think about how they're going to navigate that. What does your heartland presence look like to really capture this next wave of innovation, to capture the talent that's attached to that? I think it's a very exciting time to be doing this kind of work.
Yeah, this is we've got to invest in communities that have been, kind of left behind, if you will. And that I'm just so glad to see that the heartland, we're office out of St. Louis and Atlanta, so have a Midwest presence already. But there's a huge need to grow that population-based skill set. And this is where and how I think our economy will continue to thrive. And, we just don't become, lopsided on the coast, but that we build up the middle as well.
And it influences, I think, you hear a lot of the rhetoric now around competitiveness, national competitiveness, the sort of converging national security and geopolitical interests with some of this tech and innovation practice. And I think, for us really to be competitive in this next phase and keep our advantage in terms of new technology and new innovation, we can't be excluding wide swaths of the population from this. It's really imperative that we realize how to activate states and communities and populations and demographic groups that have really been left behind in this space. And I think that is not, it's not charity, right? It's a smart investment. It's something that really needs to be happening, I think, for this industry, for this country, to really maintain its prominence and its leadership in a lot of these industries.
I agree. I think that's fantastic. Well, you've been an incredible leader in this space, personally and also the organization. And I do have to say that I am, a board member and advisor of TIL. So, but how do entrepreneurs, founders, and even large corporations get engaged in Intel, in the region, in the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. We are, here, as I mentioned, really kind of opening the doors, and a lot of these things that we've been developing for a few years are now mature enough to start bringing in the industry. So I think that there's an incredibly wide array. We design these programs to really fit industry needs. So there's a wide array of ways folks can engage. We have, for instance, opportunities for testing, opportunities for research partnerships, opportunities for hiring. I even have a colleague here who's walking around the floor who works with an organization called In Tulsa, whose mission it is to really grease the wheels and enable a smooth transition for startups that are looking to locate a presence in Tulsa and take advantage of this infrastructure. So they will help with office space, with manufacturing space, with local hiring, with navigating the tax credits, all of those sorts of things that I think are usually offered to large manufacturing projects, but not offered to startups. We're really trying to make this as welcoming a community and an ecosystem as possible for companies of all sizes to engage. So I think that there's an incredibly wide variety of places, of ways for startups to get involved, really depending on what they're looking for. And the best way to do that is just to reach out. I'll share information with this podcast in terms of how you can get in touch with us, tulsainnovationlabs.com or tramcluster.org for the mobility-specific work. But we are really excited to partner with folks, and I should say as well, we're hosting an event in the fall, in October, which will be promoting and putting out more information. That'll be a great opportunity for people to come in and learn more about Tulsa and the ecosystem and all that's happening. But don't wait until then. You should reach out to us now, and we're really excited to plug everyone in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me on ZeoCast.
Thanks for having me.
Wanting to have this conversation with you for so long. Thank you once again, and so many great things here at Xponential this year. So glad to have Daniel. Thank you so much. We'll be back.
Thanks. Take care.